So we are joined by Lisa Molinari this morning from the Orion Military Scholarships. And I am thrilled to get to talk to you about what Orion does and how they interact with the military community, specifically for military families who are looking at an option that is beyond the traditional school that we always see. So if you could break it down in your elevator pitch, can you explain to our audience what Orion is and what you do?
Absolutely. So Orion Military Scholarship Fund is a 501c3 charity. We're a public charity. And what we do, this is just in its essence, what we do is we offer a combination now of boarding school scholarships and financial aid to make boarding school affordable or doable for military families. And our mission is not only to offer them a quality education, because the boarding schools do offer, just a fantastic educational opportunity, but the main reason is to offer stability so that these kids can go to high school, go to one high school. I mean, can you believe it? Wow, that's a novel idea for military families. Yeah. So that's what it's about. And, this is sort of because of a lot of research that's been done on instability for military kids and sort of what it sets them at higher risk for a lot of different things. And so stability in education and stability in their social lives is so important. And that's what we do. That in a nutshell is what we do. So we facilitate giving children of active duty military families the opportunity to go to one high school for all 4 years.
Which is huge because most military kids, myself included, we bounce around a lot. I went to 7 schools from kindergarten to graduation. It was every year, every 2 years, moving again, and you don't know who you're going to see and how you're going to fit in, and everything is brand new. And for some students, it's really hard to be resilient. My sister and I handled it very differently. I loved the moving. I loved meeting new people. She never felt stable. So for her, it was a lot more, oh crap, I got to make new friends again. So this kind of opportunity for students like that is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned resilience, and that's a big word today. And, most military kids do build up that resilience, after all these moves, but it's still hard on them. It's still something that is a hardship. And it sets them in, the boarding schools that we work with, our member schools, want military kids because of that resilience. But at the same time, the interruption is still really tough for them. And as resilient as they are, they still have to make a new friend. They still can't play that friendship out to what its potential could have been. They still can't continue in that math level that they were in. They still can't do that sport that they started at the last duty station because they don't have it at the next duty station. So there's a lot of sort of missed potential that comes with moving, even though they do build that resilience that is a great, character trait for their lives.
So how did Orion come about? I know that there's obviously a problem that needed to be fixed, but how do you sit there and go, okay, we know the problem, this is what we want to do? And you talk about boarding schools. I know that that's the whole point of Orion, is to get these students in there in a financial way, help them out with it. But for somebody like me, I didn't really realize that there were boarding schools in the US. I knew there was a handful of military academies that you could go to and some prep schools that you normally think of as New England prep schools and that kind of Ivy League pipeline. Mm-hmm. So how did Orion and the company come and go, this is what we want to do and how we want to do it? How did you start with looking at these schools, and how do you choose the schools that you work with?
Yep. So I was just like you. I thought boarding schools existed on TV and movies. You know what I mean? Like, they're not really there anymore. Are you kidding me? That's that old stuff you see in, on Dead Poets Society. Well, we were stationed in Florida, and we got orders to the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. And so I did what I always do. I get online. I start, like a lot of military moms, you get online, you start looking at the schools in the area. Our kids were all public schools, DOD schools, and local public schools their whole lives, as was I as a kid. I lived in a small town with only one public school system, and that's where we all went. I didn't even know anyone that went to boarding school, right? So I started that research, and then we took a quick house hunting trip up to my husband and I. Just, you get the cheap ticket, no kid, we get the neighbors to help watch the kids and the dog, and we shoot up there for a house hunting trip on a plane. And so we were only there for like 2 days. And during that time, we were looking at the schools and we were kind of disappointed. Our son, this was going to be his third high school. And he was at a pretty high academic level, and none of the schools that we looked at, we even looked at a couple, like a Catholic school in the area and stuff like that, and none of the schools kind of had what he would need. And we were driving around, and I was kind of depressed, and we were sightseeing, and we drove by this old boarding school, and I look and I was like, what is that? Oh my gosh, it's like an old boarding school. So just out of curiosity, when we went back to the Navy Lodge on base, our hotel room, I was just Googling it. And on the website, it said, no matter what your financial situation is, please inquire because we have scholarships. It said something like that, right? So I wrote an email, and my husband's sitting there. It's like 10 o'clock at night. And he says, honey, look at the tuition rate. You're wasting your time. It was like, at the time, it was like 50 some thousand a year for a boarder. I think 40 some thousand for a day student. There was no way we could pay that amount, right?
Yeah.
So he said, you're wasting your time. And I wrote the email, and I just described the 2 kids that we had in high school. And the very next morning, 8 a.m., we get a call from the admissions director, and the admissions director said, we have a new military scholarship here at this school, the St. George's School. We have a new military scholarship for children like yours. Please come in and talk to us.
Oh, wow.
And so we shot over there, and we went in, and sure enough, the head of the school had, on the anniversary of 9/11, it was the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Now we're going to the 20th anniversary, had come up with this idea to offer a scholarship and got funding for a scholarship for military children. So our daughter ended up going to St. George's on this military scholarship. Her younger sister, our third child, Lillian, also ended up going on that military scholarship. And our son, he didn't qualify because he only had 1 year of school left, and you needed to be there for at least 2 years. But we had a little bit of money that we could send him to another local boarding school called Portsmouth Abbey School. And he went there for 1 year just because now we saw the value in it. And he had a fantastic year. So that scholarship at St. George's, what happened was the head of school and his wife, it's Eric and Krista Peterson, they ended up stepping down from their position and came to us and said, would you like to take a scholarship program like this, partner with us, and take it on a national level? So it's not just at this school, but it's at schools all across the nation. And we can open it up to military kids all over the place, not just 2 a year, which is what St. George's was doing. So that's what we did. We partnered with them. And in 2019, we incorporated and got our 501c3 designation from the IRS right at the beginning of the pandemic, which is unfortunate because you can't really properly fundraise, when you're in the middle of a pandemic like that. But we somehow persevered. Everyone thought it was a great idea. The schools are so enthusiastic. We have 12 member schools across the nation too. It's, New England is kind of a concentration of boarding schools, like you said, but they're all over the place. We have a school in California called Kate. We have a school in Colorado Springs, Fountain Valley School. We have a school in Pennsylvania, one in Delaware, one in New Jersey, the Lawrenceville School in New Jersey. We do have some New England schools, one in New Hampshire, one in upstate New York. And then the 2 schools here that I mentioned, Portsmouth Abbey School and St. George's School, are also in our consortium. And we have a military school, Randolph-Macon, which is in Front Royal, Virginia. I may be leaving one out, but we have 12 schools and a waiting list of schools. So we started, we had 6 children that we had more than that. We had lots of, we were shocked by the quality of the applicants. Military kids check the boxes. They're rule followers. You know, they persevere. They're hard workers. They get involved in things. You know, they're kind. They're just well-mannered. I mean, we had no one that applied that we interviewed where we were like, oh, forget about it. They're never going to get into boarding school. Literally, we had 10 applicants last year. That's not a lot, but we couldn't pick a lot because, you know, we can only fundraise so much for those kids. So we ended up selecting 6 to offer scholarships to, and even the others we were still trying to place to see if the schools would offer them financial aid, enough financial aid to make it affordable. So we had great applicants. And it's been sort of good news all the way around. The toughest part for us is fundraising. We are 4 founders that are all volunteers at this point, the Petersons and myself and my husband, Francis. And then we have a team of advisors and others who help us, an ambassador, Victoria Sarah, who is a boarding school grad and had 2 military parents, is one of our volunteer ambassadors. And so it's a lot of money to raise with boarding school, probably on average, about $65,000 a year at this point.
That's college tuition.
It is. It's higher than a lot of college tuition. So it's a lot of money to raise. We need a lot of support from donors, you know, from corporate sponsors, things like that. And that's what we're currently working on. So I just gave you a huge,
you're good.
like a walking pamphlet because we're all so passionate about it. So I am kind of annoying in that way that I'm sort of like a walking pamphlet for the whole thing.
Oh, you answered about 4 more of my questions that were coming up. So, for the students that apply, you mentioned that when you were looking at boarding schools, there was a boarding option and a day option. How many of the students that applied are looking at boarding options versus day options?
Well, what we are providing is our kids were day students because we lived here. What the school told us was, if your husband gets orders, you know, and we thought he would get orders during our time here. They said, if your husband gets orders, your kids can then become boarders and we'll pay the extra money for that.
Okay.
So, but what ended up happening was my husband, he thought he was going to stay to 30, but he got out at 28 because, you know how those decisions are made. You think it's going to happen. And then it's like, no, this would actually be better if you wanted the private sector now, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So we ended up staying in Newport for a second tour, and he got out at 28. And so the girls stayed boarders or day students that whole time. Orion's model is for boarding school primarily because that's what offers the stability. We want, you know, we have certain, like we had some applicants last year. One of our schools that I forgot to mention, Episcopal High School, which is in Northern Virginia, so near the DC area. We might have an applicant that's in DC, but thinks they'll get orders. So they could start as a day student if they wanted to, and then flex into boarding school. But primarily, like our 6 applicants, they're one of them, their parents are stationed at Gitmo, Cuba. Well, they're coming here to St. George's. So of course that child's going to be a boarder. We had another student who was in Hawaii, moved in the middle of all this just a month ago to North Carolina. He's going to be going to Tilton School, which is in New Hampshire. We have a child that just moved to Arizona from DC. He's going to Fountain Valley School. We have a girl whose parents are her Army parents are near Fort Campbell, Kentucky. She's going to boarding school in New Jersey at Lawrenceville School. So for the most part, for these kids to have a stable education, it's going to involve boarding school.
How do you present that with parents that are concerned about leaving their kids behind? Because I know within the military community, there are a lot of options for how to do that, whether it's doing a geo batch thing where family stays behind so a kid can finish, but then the family is divided, or the kid stays with other family or friends that they've made at the duty station to get through it. But I know that's a very difficult decision to leave family members behind in some way, to move on and leave them there for, even if it is for an educational benefit, like it's going to do so much good for these students. How do you help parents who kind of struggle with that thought process of, oh, I'm going to leave my child behind?
Well, one of the things that we noticed is this is mostly the kids motivated to, it's not that the parents aren't motivated to do it, but these kids, I mean, we just had an applicant or a child that wants to apply during our second year. So our application season opens September 1st. And
Okay.
he contacted us. They just got stationed in Japan and he reached out, and this was all him looking into it. He wanted away. He was bummed out that he's going to have to move again. He just moved to Japan. Then he's looking at a third high school when they move again after that 2-year tour is over. And he's tired of moving and wants to stay put for the rest of his high school period. So he looked into it and then went to his parents, and then they scheduled a Zoom call with us, and we did a lot of talking to them. And it's the child is the one that has to sort of want this. And then when the parents see that the child wants this type of option, then that sort of makes them sit down and say, okay, tell us about this. How often do we get to see our child? Do we get to call them every week? What kind of environment will they be in? And I do a lot of talking to them about that. Also, our other partners, especially Krista Peterson and Eric Peterson, I mean, they lived this boarding school experience. They had 3 sons that also, one of them went to junior boarding school, and the others also went to boarding school. They all know boarding school culture. They've worked in it their whole lives, or their whole adult lives. And, there is something to one of the things we explained that I didn't know was that whole culture in boarding school is there's so much camaraderie. There's so much, it's sort of a community-based thing. Your child goes there. It's not even like college, because in college you go to a dorm and you have that, you have similar kind of experience where you go to a dining hall in a dorm and you have teachers, but you're not all living in one small, campus together, seeing each other for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
You have dorm parents that live at the ends of the dorms. The boarding schools build housing for the faculty at the end of the dorms, and there's always a family that serves as dorm parent. A lot of times the kids are offered to babysit the dorm parents' kids, and it's very family oriented. They all go to each other's sporting events. Now, I had the best of both worlds because I was over on campus all the time, and I sort of served as kind of a de facto local parent for some of the kids. There were other military scholars at St. George's, and I would offer to, oh, do you need a ride? This is only, of course, with the parents' permission and with the school's permission. But, one of the military scholars would want to go to the base pharmacy to pick up a prescription or go do some Christmas shopping at the exchange or whatever. And I would give her rides for that. And sometimes we'd have kids over for dinner, or boarders that were interested in the military base, we'd give them tours, or if they were interested in going to the military. So there is a close-knit community, and there are bonds that are made in boarding school culture that those of us that didn't go to boarding school don't understand. And once my kids were a part of it, here's a great example. So my son went to Portsmouth Abbey for 1 year. He was a day student. Day students have to get off campus at some point, but my kids wanted to go there. They didn't have to go there for breakfast. Soon as their evening activity was over, so you have your sport after school, as soon as their sport was over, they were allowed to leave campus. And some of the day students do that. They go home and do their studying at home. The boarders have mandatory study time and have to go to the library or a designated study area, which is a great habit.
Awesome. Yeah.
And but our kids didn't want to miss out on it. Our son stayed at Portsmouth Abbey. He would go at 7 a.m. and he would stay until like 11:30 at night. And he loved it. He loved to be around the other students. He bonded very quickly with them. He had a fantastic year. Here he was, a day student, at a boarding school. And I remember I went to his graduation, and like, you know how your life sort of passes before your eyes at graduation, their lives pass before your eyes. And I remember sitting there and just looking out at the crowd thinking, what have I done? I moved my kid to 3 different schools. I'm a terrible parent. You know, this is all, and he was a day student here. I'm sure they couldn't bond with him because he was just a day student. And they've been here for 4 years living together. Well, they called his name to go up on stage and get his diploma. And the whole student body, the whole faculty gave him a standing ovation. That's how much they bonded. And not the other kids. Like, he made such a mark on that school in such a short period of time. And they, you know, he was like a legend, you know. So it was, tears were squirting out of my eyes. It was
Oh,
the best mom experience I ever had. And similarly, our daughters, they were at their schools for, you know, at St. George's. Our older daughter entered as a sophomore, and our younger daughter started as a freshman, and they were able to go there that whole time. So they also wanted to go, and I want to go because I'm meeting up with my friends to have breakfast. And so I drove every morning early and dropped them off so that they could go throw their bags in the day dorm, and because they, you know, there are day student spaces that they get, that so that they feel a part of the community. And then they wanted to go to breakfast. They wanted to be there all day. They wanted to stay and do the studying at night, you know. And so that's how much of sort of an intense social bonding experience it is for the kids. They bond with the faculty, they bond with the staff even, you know, they get to know the folks who come in and work in the lunch areas, and the groundskeepers, and, you know, they make friends with all these people because it's a very close-knit sort of family oriented community.
that's amazing. I
It is.
know that a lot of students miss out on that in the military community because of moving so often. It's hard to keep that community. I feel lucky that I did do one high school for 4 years, public school, stayed in the same one because my dad chose to take orders purposefully that would not make us have to move. So we were very lucky in that. But I have friends who 4 years, 4 high schools, and they don't know what it's like. And it's hard. It's hard to keep those connections and keep those bonds. I now teach in the school system that I went through. So the
Yeah.
teachers that I had, I see again, and I'm like, I feel very lucky to still have a connection with that community. And it sounds like within the boarding school community, they get to do that. And that's amazing. So you mentioned that the next term applications are opening on September 1st. Is that for the like January spring semester of the 21-22 year, or is it for the 22-23 school year?
It's for the 20, so the kids who would be applying starting September 1st, our deadline is December 1st for those applications. They'll be up on our website, which is behind me, orionmilitary.org, under the How to Apply tab. They're in PDF form, you can download them. But the kids who will be applying in this next round, which starts September 1st, they are looking to enter boarding school in the fall of 2022. So
Okay.
our first cohort, we call our 2021 cohort, even though they applied in 2020, that cohort begins next month. So we just held, and this we will do for each cohort, before they go to boarding school, we hold what we're calling a boarding school boot camp. And we just did that last week. And it's basically a 4-hour webinar where we get on, we have recent boarding school grads, they're military kids on the call too. It's a big, you know, Zoom call with breakout sessions. And it tells the parents and the, you know, the families and the scholars everything they need to know to start boarding school. And the other thing we do, and we talk very candidly, they can ask questions, you know, is there peer pressure? What if I get in trouble? What are those systems? What are the rules? What's the dress code? What's the lingo? You know, all kinds of things. What if I don't like my roommate? You know, all that kind of stuff is what we talked about. And so it's and it's kind of fun. At the end, we do sort of a social where all the young people go into one session room and bring snacks, and then, you know, the parents go in another, and we can kind of talk openly in those sessions. But so we do that, and we also work on sort of assigning a local support family to each scholar when they're going to boarding school. So first we reach out to the parents and we say, do you know anyone in the area of the boarding school, like within a half an hour or an hour drive, that you would trust to be a local support family? And preferably someone military that could have access to a base if anything happens, the kid loses their ID, or, you know, they need to get to a military clinic or pharmacy. And so we arrange for each of the children to have a local support family that they can, you know, reach out to locally, maybe even just to get away and have, you know, a movie night, or just, you know, have a home cooked meal with the family, or have that family come and watch one of their sporting events. I mean, because that's one of the things you don't realize is that I was so lucky I got to watch my girls do sports, and my son, you know, at their schools. But when you go as a parent to boarding school events, it's not like high school. There aren't stands with all the parents there.
Yeah.
They're far away. They can't get there. So there'll be a few parents, but not a lot. And so I would always bring cookies, you know, do all the things that you do in your normal public schools. And the kids like just so appreciate it. It's really neat. So anyway, that's all part of it. And was there a part of your question that I didn't answer?
Nope, but I do have a follow-up on it. You talk about this being the 22-23 school year. So
Yeah.
are we looking at freshmen for that school year? Sophomores? What is the requirements for students who are applying for this?
So ideally, the kids are applying to become freshmen at the school. And this is an interesting topic, but we also place kids going into their sophomore year. We've even had an applicant who was going into a junior year. The issue with that is because our mission is to give full scholarships, but as a startup charity, we're working toward that. And last year we gave partial scholarships, and our member schools understand our mission, and they are all on board with it. So they are also giving financial aid dollars toward the tuition. So it's sort of a combination right now until we have enough funding that we can offer full scholarships. So that is an aspect. So why that's relevant is because at boarding schools, the most financial aid dollars they have is for freshmen, and then it's a little less for sophomores, and it's a little less for juniors. And the other part of it is a lot of the schools, they don't recruit for juniors. If someone leaves the school and decides they don't like that school, they want to go to a different school, then they have an open spot. But for the most part, they don't have a lot of open spots for junior year, and very few at all, if any at all, for seniors. So a lot of schools won't even allow you to apply for a senior year spot because they just don't have enough. Some schools do, like Portsmouth Abbey. My son went as a senior to Portsmouth Abbey and just had 1 year there. But most, a lot of the schools don't. So it's most beneficial at this point for our Orion scholars to be entering as freshmen and sophomores. Sophomores is, we can find opportunities for sophomores pretty easily at this point, but mostly freshman year. Now, here's another thing that most people don't know about boarding school. There's that word when you repeat a grade, okay? And so to most of us, to repeat a grade is like, oh God, no, that's a bad word. You would never.
Yeah.
That means you have bad grades. That means you've been a bad student. That means you failed. Well, in the boarding school realm, it doesn't mean that. It's an open term. If you're a repeat sophomore, you're a repeat freshman. Generally, what that means is you've made a strategic decision, a lot of times due to sports, or due to that you want to, like, for example, kids who go to Randolph-Macon, which is a military school. Randolph-Macon requires certain prerequisites for you to get into their aeronautics and aeronautical engineering sort of track.
Okay.
And so in order to do that, you kind of have to start as a freshman there. So if you were coming into Randolph-Macon and you've already completed your freshman year at a public school, you may decide to be a repeat freshman, and they won't stop you from doing that. That's up to you. You can enter as a repeat freshman so that you get the science and math that they require for you to do that aeronautical track. So there are academic reasons why you might enter as a repeat freshman or a repeat sophomore. And there are a lot of athletes, it's really common in the hockey community, but also it could be for any sport that you decide, I want to get, I just started this sport and I want to get 4 full years at that competitive stage, so that maybe I could get a scholarship into college, or be recruited into college for that sport. So it could be lacrosse, it could be soccer, it could be any variety of sports, where you want to really hone your skills. And so repeat in the boarding school realm is not a bad word at all. It's seen as a very smart strategic decisions for kids to do that.
Coming from a teacher point of view, I think more students should slow down and do things like that. And I do know that it is very much a negative if you say you have to repeat, but for some students, it's what they need.
Yep.
And getting to do that again and getting to set themselves up for a better future
Absolutely.
is wonderful. You said that it's partial scholarships at this point. You're aiming to get to where it's full scholarships. For students applying, are they saying this is the boarding school I would like to go to and I'm applying for this, or do you help place students?
So we're not a placement service, but so we have 12 schools. And when we get an applicant, we interview them and we ask them, have you looked at the schools on the website? Do any stick out to you? Do you have family in the area of any of the schools? We ask those kind of questions. We want to know what their preference is, because each school is different. I mean, one of our schools, Millbrook, has a zoo. St. George's has a sailboat where you can go on semester at sea. Portsmouth Abbey is a Catholic school, one of the only Catholic boarding schools in the country. Randolph-Macon's a military school.
Right.
So, some of them have a very outdoorsy vibe, and they mountain bike and ski, and so we look at their preference. But when we sit down with our applicants or our applications and we go through, we pick usually about 3 or more schools that we think that child would be successful in and be a good fit in. Okay. And this is based on our knowledge. And, my husband and I are the military couple in this partnership, but the Petersons, Eric and Krista, they know these schools like the back of their hand. They know most of the heads of school. They know staff at the schools. They're very entrenched in the boarding school community and really know the personalities and have been to most of these schools. So they're invaluable in this process. So we sort of pick those schools. And then when we offer the scholarship to the student, we tell them we would give you a scholarship to any of these schools. And we show them which schools those are. So let's say that student disagrees with us and says, well, okay, I like those 5 schools. I want to apply to those 5 that you've picked out, or those 3. But I also really like that one over there, that other school. And we kind of think that academically the kid might not get in, or might not be able to cut the higher academics at that one school that we have that has the higher academics, or that school we think has a personality that maybe that child won't fit with that community the way we think that they would fit these others. That child is still welcome to apply to that school. It's just that our scholarship is going to go to the schools that we think that they would be the best fit in. Got it. And what we do, so the kids don't have to apply twice. Our application is modeled after sort of the common application that boarding schools use. So most of them sort of, I can't remember the name of the organization that they all sort of belong to that has an application. They all use that common application and then sort of tailor it to their own school with maybe an essay question or 2. So our application is modeled after that. So what we do is, after the family applies, because it's daunting to go through what is essentially almost like a college application process when your kid's only going to be a freshman or sophomore in high school. So we don't want them to have to go through too much paperwork. So they apply with us, and then our schools agree to accept that application as their school application.
Oh,
So
okay.
once the child has been told they receive a military scholarship, we then forward that application to those schools that we've matched them with, the member schools. And just so you know, we've had applicants that last year, one of our applicants that's going to Fountain Valley School, his family applied to, they took the schools that we matched him with, but they also applied to all of our other member schools and schools outside of our consortium. Now, what ended up happening was that one of the schools, the school that we thought he'd be best for, is the one that he is going to. But they sort of had one of those, strategies that some people do, where it's like, let's just throw the spaghetti on the wall and
See what sticks.
And interestingly, schools outside of our consortium were giving them financial aid offers and saying, come to our school, we'll give you this much money, because this is why schools want military kids. This is a trend right now among, not just among, not with, we're the first to do this, Orion, for boarding schools, but even in colleges, Princeton, Brown, Vanderbilt, all have programs now for children of military. They almost want to recruit military children. They see it as adding to their socioeconomic diversity. They want to honor military families. They see it adding to diversity in a lot of ways. Geographic diversity. They want children from all over the place. They want kids that are worldly. So even schools that aren't in our consortium want military kids. Now, usually, even when they offer a financial aid offer, there's still going to be a large amount of money those families would have to cover without a scholarship, to cover. So Orion puts those two together so that it is something that military families can manage.
Okay. What one last closing statement would you have for families who are on the fence on if this is something that they should even look into, if it is worth the time and the stress that sometimes comes with applying for things? Because I remember going through the college application process myself, and it's pages and pages of paperwork, and to know that you might get turned down, it's like, do I do all this paperwork and there's a chance that they're just going to say, sorry, kick rocks?
Yeah.
So how do you address families? Like, what would you say to them? What one thing do you want to stick with them that would make them think, I really need to look into Orion, and this is something that could really benefit my kid?
What I would say is to reach out to us. Okay. Our application season opens September 1st. You don't have to fill out the application first. We can schedule a Zoom call with you and talk to you about whether you think this would be a good fit for your family or not. And so first of all, just reach out to us. Here's our website. We have a contact form on our website, but also we have a email address, information@orionmilitary.org. You can email us directly with that. And we can set up a Zoom call and just sit and talk about it and talk to your child about it. That's what we did last season. We talked to every single family, no matter where they were in the world. Give us a call. Or send us a Zoom, or a request to have a Zoom call, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it. And the other thing that I would put out there is that our two daughters and our son all experienced this on some level. And the cool thing was that it opened up kind of like doors that we didn't know. It was, I know this is a trendy term right now, but it really was boarding school for our kids. They were day students, but they really infused themselves into those communities. And it was transformative, meaning that it changed our lives, our whole family. It really changed our lives. That sounds so dramatic, but it's true. It opened our eyes to educational opportunities, global studies programs, semester at sea, really experiences that are life-changing. They were life-changing for our kids. And by association, it changed my husband and I, it changed our outlook on what our kids could do in life and what they could become. They all went on to colleges that we really hadn't considered the college, because the college counseling programs at these schools are so good. It opened that whole door for us. And our kids ended up going to programs in college that we hadn't anticipated and that were great fits for them. So I would encourage families to ask a lot of questions. I know this is hard to wrap your head around because I was there. I had to wrap my head around this. And I really had to almost see it with my own eyes and experience it to understand that. So you military parents out there that can't do that right now because you're stationed in Germany or wherever you are, schedule a Zoom call with us and let's talk about it. And I hope that I can give you enough of our personal experience to kind of let you see and understand whether or not this could be an opportunity for you and your children.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to talk to you, Lisa, and am very interested. I come from an education background, so this is fascinating to me. And I love that there's this option out there for students and that you and the Peterson family have made this connection for military families to have another education opportunity or option, especially with everything that we've seen in the past year and a half, people saying that there are not options out there, that you have public school and that's it. Otherwise, you have to figure it out. This bridges some of that gap, and I think that's wonderful. And I hope all of our readers and watchers of this go on to look at theorionmilitary.org and that you get a ton of requests for Zoom meetings from parents that never even thought that this was an option for their student. So thank you so much for meeting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course.